All right, I see the recording has started, so we will get going. Good morning, everybody. I'm calling this meeting of the Public Safety Communications Task Force to order. It is 11:18 on September 10, 2025, and I'm Barbara Neal. As a reminder, the meeting's being recorded, and the recording will be posted to the task force webpage following the meeting. Let's start with a roll call of task force members. Please verbally acknowledge your presence when I call your name. Dan Batesy.
Here.
Okay. Ron Kumitz.
Here.
Jim Mack.
Here.
Excellent. And I think that is it. We do not have Paul White today, and we may have Michael Wright joining. Mayor Donges also cannot join us today. So also joining us today is Emily Mullaney as our administrative support person, and our project management partners, Rick, Dom, and Elizabeth from Televate. Morning, everybody.
Morning.
And we also have Phil Sisk here today from Mission Critical Partners. So, and we have one member of the public, morning, Phil, in Michelle Hunt from VSP. Morning, Michelle.
Good morning again.
Yes. Okay. Let's see. Covered everybody. So let's move on to approval of the agenda. The agenda was distributed to task force members. It's also available on our webpage. Are there any changes needed to the agenda today? Okay, hearing nothing, we'll consider the agenda approved and move on to approval of the minutes. These would be the minutes from the August 27th meeting, regular meeting number 58. Are there any changes needed to these minutes? Okay, is there a motion to approve the minutes from August 27th?
I will make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Ron.
Seconding.
Thank you, Jim. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes from August 27th, raise your hand or indicate by saying aye.
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 Excellent. The minutes are approved from August 27th. And Dom, I guess we're at the point where I hand it over to you for project updates.
All right, thank you, Barb, and good morning, everyone. The biweekly status report was distributed earlier this week, and to summarize the last couple of weeks, we've been working heavily with the working groups that have been performing an in-depth review of the system planning document that was developed by MCP and distributed, and of course posted on the task force website. Last meeting, we had reports from the Tier 2 and Tier 3 working groups, and I believe we're going to further consider those later on the agenda. The governance working group has also been meeting. In the last couple of weeks, we've had 2 meetings, one on 27th of August and then September 4th. And actually this week also we had a governance working group meeting on the 8th. We're making good progress in the governance working group, and hopefully we are close, maybe within a couple of weeks, of being ready to provide a report to the full task force on the governance. There are action item lists that have been created for all 3 of those working groups. And those actions continue to be worked even in the Tier 3 and Tier 2 and Tier 3 cases where we've made our reports, but there's still some ongoing activity that we're working to make sure we resolve those actions. We also, not part of these last 2 weeks, but just yesterday held the first Tier 1 working group meeting. And we are establishing action items for that working group and have scheduled the next meeting for next week. I believe it's next Thursday to continue with that working group. One other working group, just looking at our schedule, the organic and inorganic working group met earlier before all of the other working groups began their activities. now, since we're starting to get reports, it probably makes sense to get that team back together again. Maybe next week we'll look to schedule another meeting of the organic and inorganic working groups. That's primarily been the activity. It's been a busy time for most of the task force members, and they've been working hard to support all these working groups. So that's what I have today, Barb. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Dom? Okay. I have on the list that we were going to continue the discussion of the tier 2 and tier 3 findings today. Are we ready to do that? And can you guide us through that a bit, Dom?
Certainly, I can share the presentation that was made last time. I'll bring that up. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right. I put that in the presentation mode. Hopefully it's appears in full screen now for everyone. So this is what was presented, and I'll skip through the schedule kind of in the we reviewed what the format was and the process that each working group went through, and a format of the responses. So would you like me to go through each of the work items again, Barb, with the recommendation?
Yeah, I'm trying to recall if there were some decisions that were yet to be made. I'm not quite sure where we left off with this.
Well, there was a recommendation for each of the work items here. You'll see 3 here on this screen. There's a recommendation on each work item as how the task force should approach this. For example, for the CAD core data transfer, the working group had expressed preference for option 2 to implement the CAD to CAD interface with PSAPs continuing to transfer the caller to the dispatch center.
Okay, good. And I think we were going to get to a point where just checking in to see if the task force as a whole had any concerns or questions or about how this became the recommendation. So maybe it would be good to go through them again, at least quickly, and see if there's any other discussion needed by the larger task force on any of these, or if we're accepting of what's presented. Does that make sense?
Fine by me. I'm happy to continue.
Okay.
All
All
right.
right, let's work through those then. And
Okay.
people should just provide input with each one if there are any concerns or questions.
Absolutely. For the tier 2 work items, there are, I think there were 9 or 10. We'll go through them individually. We mentioned the CAD core data transfer, and the working group's preference was for option 2, and that was based on, I think, overwhelming support that there should be a CAD to CAD interface moving forward, and the dispatch center would still like to have the opportunity to talk to the caller. So option 2, which includes continuing to transfer the caller to the dispatch center, was the chosen option. The next work item was essentially the CAD itself, and there were discussions over these options, which included expanding the participation in the existing CAD user group, or developing and implementing new functionality with the existing CAD system. And option 3 was the preferred approach, but from the working group, which was to develop and issue an RFP for a statewide CAD system. that supports all public safety disciplines. Televate did reach out to a particular CAD vendor, one that is familiar to some of the dispatch centers in the state, to get a cost estimate as to what that might cost. Certainly, this is just a ROM based on initial assumed requirements, but you'll see there under the comments section that this particular ROM was cost of short of $2 million over a 5-year period for the CAD itself, and that would include interface to the existing Valcor records management system. If the task force chooses to expand the RFP and to potentially replace the Valcor with a different records management system, that would add approximately 4.5 million over that 5-year period for this work item. I'll pause if there's any questions.
Yeah, Dom, just to clarify, 4.5 million would be for a replacement of Valcor. Is this another way of saying it, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, copy.
Yes, the request, the cost for the CAD itself would be to assume that that CAD would interface to Valcor.
And I recall the commissioner talking about how well the Valcor RMS function works for law enforcement. So I think there probably can be more discussion around whether it's even within the task force purview to comment on a records management system, or if we need to stay in our lane, so to speak, and deal only with the CAD component. But I think there's more to discuss maybe around that.
Yeah, my question was just differentiating those two cost points, and that's where I was going to.
Yep. Okay. Anything else on this one before Dom continues? Okay, go ahead, Dom.
All right, thank you. The third work item was regarding reporting capabilities for the CAD functionality. And there were 3 options given, but the working group felt that this would be based on what the replacement CAD would be, given that their preference for the work item above was to issue an RFP for a new statewide CAD. So they felt that the reporting capabilities would be addressed with this RFP, and they should be incorporated into the requirements for the CAD RFP. If there's no questions on that, I'll move on. The next work item was a similar result to that previous one, where the working group felt that those requirements related to CAD to RMS data flow should be part of that statewide CAD RFP, and they should be incorporated into that RFP in terms of requirements. The next item, switching away from CAD, was digital logging recorder standard. And the working group identified that there is no current standard and felt that that was necessary to develop. So they identified a preference for either option 2 or option 3, which was to develop a statewide digital logging recorder standard and to require the recording of all dispatch channels for all 3 public safety disciplines. The difference with option 3 would essentially dictate that via legislation and include it in state statute. So the working group felt either 2 or 3 of the number 2 or 3 would be appropriate. They wanted to leave the question about statute as up to the task force to decide.
Dom, I'm sorry, Barb, perhaps I stepped in front of you here.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to ask, so if it was option 2, where would that standard live if not in state statute or law.
My assumption, Dan, would be that this would be part of the governance board, where what we've been pursuing in the governance working group is to have a board structure which would include committees, subcommittees that might address specific individual items, both related to operation and technical. So this could be one of the technical subcommittees could develop this standard, and it would be recommended, if you will, by the
Yeah.
governance group.
That's a clarification I'm looking for, because it seems to me that if it's not a standard set in some kind of formal regulation, it would be a voluntary standard and therefore a little trickier to enforce.
Agreed.
That's similar, Dan, to where I was going. I think if the governance entity is given the authority in statute to do rulemaking, for example, we could develop, or it could develop the standard there via rulemaking, and presumably the governance committee would have the authority to set policy and standards and all of that, so it could be done there as well. You probably want to think about, I think the most teeth would come if it was in state statute, but
It's not without peril, because state statute is also very difficult to change.
Yes.
And yeah.
Yeah.
I like the notion of rulemaking. But yeah, okay. I'm not opposing this in either direction. I think it's just a matter of consideration in terms of where we want to end up. And I think you're right, Barb. I think it does pivot upon the governance structure.
Right. And for example, with the 911 board, we have a requirement for recording and for saving the calls for 7 years. The requirement to record is met by the board, so we include that in our system. Our system provider provides that for us. And those are set in technical and operational standards, which were adopted by rule. So I think it could work effectively without being in statute.
Okay.
And by the way, we save our 911 calls for 7 years, which is a lot longer than many entities, and certainly more than dispatch is doing now. And whether that length of time is necessary for the dispatch side is up for discussion as we go along. I'll add that Michelle just commented in the chat that she believes the dispatch saves them for 3 years, saves the recordings for 3 years.
And that's,
all right.
And that's, if I can ask Michelle, that's statewide, or that's based on individual dispatch center policy?
I can only speak for VSP.
Okay.
Right. I'm fairly certain
Shelburne.
that's set by policy, individual policy. Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, in Shelburne, ours is 3 years as well.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. I think we're good to move on. There's no other
All right.
questions on this.
All right, thank you. The next item is core data transfer related to telephone, so primarily related to Annie and Allie data. The working group's preference here was what's described as option 1, with a short-term solution as to use the broader use of rapid SOS, which we know the E911 board will be transitioning to later this year, and then to, in the long term, include requirements for the Annie Alley data transfer in the CAD RFP. Any comments or questions here?
So I think last time there was a question, Dom, about the rapid SOS expansion that we're doing and the licensing. So we will have a set number of licenses there would be 1 or 2 maybe licenses per dispatch agency available. We haven't worked out all the details, but if an agency had 1 license, then 1 person could be, using this tool in the dispatch center. We recognize that there might be a need for more, and we'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it as to whether that's a 911 board function or a dispatch function as far as cost goes. So, but a set number will be included in the contract extension, and we're working on how to roll that out in a fair manner once we get the 911 piece of the contract extension items settled.
Can we identify what the additional cost would be for additional licenses?
I
Because
will need
most likely there would be additional ones required, right?
Yeah.
Based on your discussion, yeah.
it might be yes, I can find that out, and it might be good to have a bigger discussion about this because we may want to have some pilot period right before there's any commitment of additional funds to make sure this is working for entities. So, but we're open to the discussion.
Thank you.
I have a question on that, Barb. Is it a site license per position or per individual?
It's per agency, so not per individual. 1 license for the agency could be in use at any given time by any employee.
So it's
Is how I'm
just
understanding it.
one position then.
That's how I'm understanding it right now, yes.
So most dispatch centers would likely require 2 to 3, some larger, right?
I would assume, yes.
Right.
But I think we want to make sure that it operates the way everyone is expecting before
Right.
a dispatch agency, and certainly before the 911 board would, invest any more into it. But I can find out those questions, and we expect to be rolling this out shortly after the middle of October, I would expect. So later in the fall.
So that could potentially be a trial project, for example.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments on the Annie Alley data? Oh, I see someone's hand is up. Michelle?
Yeah, I'm just curious with this topic about the integration on how this would work with like a dispatch center of our size when you have one dispatcher that is covering multiple towns, sometimes multiple counties, and then you have these like all these calls automatically popping up on your screen. Like I'm just envisioning like your area gets really busy and then you have all of these things popping up that you need to control. Like I can see it working for like a dispatcher who has 1 town or maybe a couple of towns. But I guess I'm just trying to figure out how this would work with a center that has a large coverage area.
Sorry, I was muted. So Rapid SOS, Michelle, is going to be the mapping solution for the 911 equipment beginning in the middle of October. So Geocom will go away. And so my expectation is that the PSAPs would continue to use the 911 system Rapid SOS solution to do what they needed to do. This would be more for the agencies that don't have access to the 911
okay.
equipment.
I
So, so I don't think we'll have that that question to deal with.
Okay. Because I know that there is you can set up with 911 data to automatically populate. Like I believe that they do that over in Hanover PD and possibly Keene, like where they can already see our 911 calls coming in their CAD. So
Okay. That may
That's
be
what I'm-
different. I know that
Yeah.
there's some free I think they're without cost rapid SOS solutions in place in Vermont that can display 911 calls now in a dispatch center. But it's
Okay.
important to note that those are not all 911 calls. Those are calls that are coming from wireless devices with a certain operating system compatibility or certain level of operating system.
Okay.
So while probably the majority of our calls do come from those types of devices, not all of them do. So this would enhance that so that all calls would be visible.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Dom, I think
All
we're
right.
ready to move on.
Thank you. Moving on to the next items. Next work item was fire station alerting and paging data transfer. And the working group's preference was for option 1 to implement CAD-to-CAD interface to the fire station alerting and also with the PSATs continuing to transfer the caller to the dispatch center. So this would be part of a CAD interface that would be implemented via requirements for the statewide CAD RFP. The next item, I think, was similar to the one we just discussed with regards to GIS and mapping integration or enhancement. And the preference was for option 1 in the short term, which again was to expand use of Rapid SOS, which is, as Barb explained, is being rolled out in October, and then transition to option 2, which would implement a more robust CAD mapping solution with the statewide CAD RFP. The next item was over-the-top and integrated applications. The working group's preference was essentially for an enhanced option 1. Option 1 would be the statewide work group to of regional representatives to determine appropriate systems to standardize and then make available. And the enhancement that the working group felt was useful was to have a statewide contract vehicle. Then we feel that this was something that could be discussed and the standard established via governance subcommittee. And then there would perhaps be local investment based on the applications that were chosen by each local dispatch center. Okay, if there are no questions or comments, moving on, there was an item to discuss non-call processing and ancillary duty issues. This issue received discussion both in Tier 2 and Tier 3, and Tier 3 has identified a number of activities which they believed could be shared in a regionalization approach. Those activities are identified there: municipal services, alarm activation, records and warrants, and this would be also be based somewhat on the Tier 1 direction in terms of what the physical regionalization plan that's proposed. For cybersecurity,
So I'm sorry, Dom.
Yes,
So
Dan.
in this particular item, are we just deferring it to the Tier 1 decision making? It sounds like we don't really have a recommendation here.
The recommendation, and it was also discussed in Tier 3, is out of there were MCP identified maybe a number of potential ancillary duties that are taking up dispatchers' time throughout the dispatch centers. Of those, various activities, we did identify these specific activities, so a subset of those that the working group felt could be regionalized. So,
Okay.
so that would be the recommendation, is to look at regionalizing these specific activities. Exactly how that regionalization or sharing would occur would have to be based on the Tier 1 approach.
Okay, got it.
Thanks. With regards to cybersecurity, the working group's preference was for option 1 at a minimum, and they indicate that there should be a statewide GRC governance, risk, and compliance framework, but also that it might require additional discussion at a governance subcommittee. With regards to VCON, that's been discussed both here and at the working group levels. The working group did not recommend any further investment in VCOM, and just recommended that the use of VCOM be ended essentially, and salvage whatever equipment could be salvaged. And the final work item on Tier 2 was the LMR infrastructure improvement. A number of options were provided here. The working group's preference was for kind of a variation of some of these options. There is a preference for a system approach, but that should, as opposed to just being either based on county or VSP zone, it should be based more realistically on mutual aid groups and dispatch areas, while of course meeting the operational requirements of the stakeholders. This is still in development. There has been an initial draft of a candidate set of simulcast cells that could potentially address this solution. Even that is still ongoing, even though the working group is not meeting regularly. That was provided to the working group for review, and there has been some update to that. But there is a candidate solution being developed. The costs for this, again, are in development. This, of course, is going to be one of the larger cost items that would be coming out of the task force recommendation. Based on the cost will be based on the agreed upon simulcast cells that are being developed, as well as taking into account existing resources that may currently be in use. But in terms of cost here, we're talking tens of millions. I don't have a definitive number for you yet, but this is certainly one of the larger items to be discussed. Any additional questions on LMR?
It just concerns me a little bit that this is a very nebulous recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
And while I understand it and don't necessarily disagree with it, it's going to be very hard for us to put our arms around this in any kind of a meaningful way to ask for something, right? It also concerns me a little bit that we haven't really identified, when we say system of systems, we haven't really identified what a system is. And does that leave us vulnerable to every Tom, Dick, and Harry who wants to put together a system out there to have to say, well, whatever you want to do, we're okay with. We'll just, put it under our umbrella. That I have concern about that.
From my perspective, I understand, Dan, understand the concerns, and certainly the the intent would be to further define this before we complete the working group activities, especially the finance working group as well, to have a better defined LMR improvement approach and be able to put some number, some cost development number to it. So we would certainly anticipate having that prior to the task force providing any recommendations to the legislature.
Yeah,
I
and
think,
to be clear, I'm not necessarily suggesting that everything has to look exactly the same. But I am just a little concerned that this is the broadest approach. And I don't know, I'm having difficulty conceptualizing how we would use it for anything.
I'm thinking we might want to add words to better define this, like
Okay.
a system of systems that meets some established minimum technical standard, I don't know, for interoperability and resiliency, and something that would, if there are systems being developed separately from what the task force might be do, I think we need to make sure that they all work together, are interoperable and can not be siloed. This
Yeah,
says,
that's
it's not my
exactly where
wheelhouse, but
that's
what
exactly
I
where I'm going with this, Barb, is if two guys say, I want to put 2 tin cans and a piece of yarn together and be included in there, at what point do we say that's not okay? Like we're not looking to add that as an upgrade to our system. And how do we do that? That's where I think there needs to be some guardrails. And Barb, I like where you're going with this notion of, a mutually agreed upon standard or some language to say you can't just make it up. You've got to, whatever standards you're putting in your system have to match the betterment of the broader system.
right. I'm sure there must be nationally established standards for these networks. I'm not
Oh, yes.
familiar with them, but
Yes.
I would think the task force, would it be the governance group, would address, the future governance group would address these technical and operational standards. And maybe our recommendation would be that they do meet certain minimum standards. Anyway, I don't
Well,
quite have all my words together, as you can see, but I think we're thinking along the similar lines.
And I certainly believe valid concerns and recommendations. I would think it would be reasonable for the Tier 2 working group to take another look at this and to see if we can provide further definition and incorporate some of those recommendations as this is being developed. And I mentioned this is ongoing and continuing to be developed, so we can provide further definition on that.
Great. All right.
All right. We did have just an example of that we provided last time with the kind of the fragmented fire dispatch situation we have currently in Addison County. I don't think we need to develop that any further. That completes the recommendations from Tier 2. Are there other any we want to revisit or other discussions, or do we want to move on to Tier 3?
I'm
So I
seeing no
actually-
hands. Oh, go
I
ahead, Ron.
actually have some further information on that whole Addison County discussion. Because one of the things that we struggle with is the whole idea of, whether or not the whole, mutual use thing is going to be organic and how people are going to receive that and things like that. I went to an Addison County Firefighters Association or a fire chiefs meeting last night and spent hours talking to them about this kind of stuff. And in the big picture, they're pretty receptive about the idea of dedicating their frequency to this type of a system, and then trying to figure out how to enforce the rules like no directing traffic on the dispatch channel and all that kind of stuff. And even some of the agencies who have traditionally taken somewhat of a I don't want to hear other people talking, I want my own, and all other kind of stuff, are realizing that the benefits of making some compromises in that area are really have a lot of benefits for them. Same thing, when you explain to one of these chiefs that right now you have your own repeater, and if if your antenna needs to be replaced or your feed line needs to be replaced, it could cost you thousands of dollars depending on where it is. But if the equipment that you're using is part of a regional system and it's shared by 17 agencies, then all of a sudden the cost to make those regular repairs drops down significantly, and the cost of making repairs, when you have catastrophic failures like a lightning strike or something, is equally shared. The burden is shared by the same people that you have to play with. So they're really they're on board for the idea that that works for them, and we're not telling them that they can't keep some of the other stuff. We're not forcing them into this. They get to pick and choose. And some of the people that I talked to after the meeting kind of indicated that some of the outliers who may not initially participate are likely to come to their senses once they see the benefits enjoyed by the people who were early adopters, so to speak.
Great. That's encouraging, Ron. Thank you. Any other comments? Are we ready to move forward?
Looks like we are.
All right. Thank you. For Tier 3, we have a similar format to report out. We have the 9 items there that are shown towards the bottom of the screen. 9 work items that were addressed by Tier 3. And you see the members were Ron, Jim, and Barb. And moving forward, we have the first work item was standardized QA. And there were 3 options given. The working group's preference was for option 1, but to augment that with a common QA statewide policy, most likely developed through a governance subcommittee. The next item was the support and administrative roles, and this ties back to the non-call processing ancillary duties that was discussed previously with Tier 2. Tier 3 did discuss this as well, and we identified those specific items that are shown here. Under the comments, you see the administrative/HR duties, alarm activation, records, warrants, and some municipal services that could potentially be incorporated and shared resources via regionalization approach. And that would, the actual grouping or regionalization that would address this would most likely have to align with the Tier 1 regionalization plan. And moving on to some of the next work items, GIS was one, and in this case, we felt that the working group felt that option 2 is essentially ongoing today between the E911 board and individual dispatch centers. They tend to work out additions to the GIS data when necessary. And it was recommended that that process continue, which was essentially option 2. Under policies and procedures, the working group's preference was, again, option 2, where there would be state and local collaboration used to develop a list of policies and procedures for communication centers to follow. This would be, again, indicating, of course, that call taking policies and procedures already exist. This would be specifically for dispatch policies and procedures, and we would anticipate these would be identified through a governance subcommittee work.
Yeah, I'd just like to put a little bit of a finer point on this. I think eventually there should be minimum standards for at least certain policies and procedures that are established and must be met.
Yes.
But allow room for local protocols and that type of thing to still be effective. So I think I'm really falling somewhere between option 2 and option 3, and maybe it will just evolve over time. But option 2 seems like a really good place to start for those centers that might not have the bandwidth to even go and do the work to find out what recommended policies and procedures might be. So anyway, I just wanted to add that here.
Yeah, Barb, I flagged this one as well for many of the same reasons. Where I was stuck was when it says to use as a guide. I think if you create a standard and say you can use it as a guide, it's not really a standard. It's just a, hey, good to have if you decide to use it.
Right.
I agree. I don't think it necessarily has to be as comprehensive as every policy and procedure, but I think what we're trying to do here is establish a floor, not a ceiling. And if you can take some of those core elements and say, we will establish these that will be implemented by rule or theoretically by statute, that would make me more comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to have the same comment on the next one on protocols. So anyway.
You would like these to be, sounds like consensus is like these to be augmented by saying to be implemented by rule for both policies, procedures, and the protocol.
That's my preference. I think we will want to carefully word it, though, so that we're defining, yes, or some entity is defining certain minimum requirements. And
minimum set.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that it's not whatever governance entity coming in and like stomping all over people's turf, right? It's because that's not going to set up a good relationship necessarily. But I think there could be certain things that policies and procedures must be established for. Yeah, and I think I got to let my thoughts further percolate here, but that's where I am right now.
I think
I wonder though, Jim and Ron might want to chime in here, because we had quite a few discussions on this in the working group, and I don't want them to think I'm changing direction on them.
No, I don't necessarily disagree with you. I just don't know how to word it.
Right.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure either.
I think we can leave the wording up to Dom. How's that?
Take a crack at
connected. Couldn't you connect it to the governance and say the governance committee will determine a minimum set of procedures and or protocols that will be adopted by rule, with the ability to add additional procedures at a local level? again, floor, not the ceiling. You can
Right.
have more, you just can't have less.
Right.
I think that's exactly what we're saying.
That's good.
And Ron, I feel like I might have cut you off. Do you have more to add here?
No, I don't. I can say that in my discussions, that the first responder community can really kind of get behind that, because one of the things that they see is a lot of inconsistencies, from dispatcher to dispatcher often and stuff like that. So I think that, one of the things that I suggested was that perhaps they should partner with the dispatch group and work together to find something that works for all of them.
Yep.
Oh, thank you all. I can propose some additional wording. I guess that would help clarify that. Both for policies and procedures and protocols. One other note on protocols was the option outlined there as option 2 did not specifically identify local collaboration, and the working group wanted to make sure that that was included. And would likely, of course, be part of a governance subcommittee. And we would assume the governance subcommittee would include both state and local participants, but that is still being developed within the governance working group. So we'll have some updates here. Happy to do that. Are we ready to move on?
I think we are.
Okay, the next work item was planning. This was essentially related to continuity of operations planning. The working group's preference was for option 2 for state-led training and workshops on planning initiatives and leadership training. And we felt that this could be addressed also via a governance subcommittee approach. The next item was recruiting and hiring. The working group's preference was again for option 2 to create standard job classifications and descriptions. And of course, it was certainly the preference was also to promote the reclassification of telecommunicators as professionals and first responders, and to couple those with centralized job posting websites. There have been, and the comments indicate some resources were identified that show some job descriptions that could be utilized, and that would further be developed and recommended as part of the governance subcommittee work. Next, training.
I'm sorry,
addressed.
Dom.
I'm sorry,
I
Nick.
meant to reach out to Barb on this and I didn't. When it notes reclassification as a first responder, I don't really understand what that means. Is there a formal classification for that, or are you just looking for recognition of that, or?
I think we would be looking, and other states have done this, for legislative recognition that emergency communications professionals are in fact first responders like law, fire, and EMS, and maybe there are others in that pot now as well. And how it's worked in other states is that opens up opportunities for better benefits or different benefits, potentially better pay. I'm not, maybe Dom or Rick could remember all of the components of why we would want to consider advocating for that. Sorry, I don't have it right top of mind.
I think you kind of had most of that there, Barb. Essentially what it does is
Right.
it essentially puts the dispatchers on par with, police officers and firefighters and EMS personnel in terms of benefits like, treatment for PTSD and things like that, which they're currently not entitled to because they're at the moment sort of recognized as clerical personnel for something.
Okay.
Right, and there were a number of examples shown on, for instance, on NINA website. They have a link which shows various states that have taken some similar sort of action and what that action included.
And there's been efforts at the national level to do this reclassification, wherever that happens in the federal system. But separate from that are individual states moving towards it rather than waiting for the federal work.
Yeah, I know APCO and NINA have both been pursuing this at the federal level, but for some time, and still has yet to happen. So I believe that's why states have gone out and done something on their own.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if, so I'm not opposed to this at all, but it just strikes me that classification has a very specific meaning, especially if you are a state employee, and acknowledging that not everybody in this pool will be a state employee. Is classification the correct term to be using here, or is there, again, I don't know. I'm it's just posing the question.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about, how state employees can be classified state employees, or they can be something other than that.
Yeah, if you say we're going to reclassify a state employee, that there's a very specific process for that, and it has implications that are different than saying you're a professional, you're a first responder to a non-state employee. And again, I'm not sure that necessarily has to change this process, but I wonder if the lawyers would ask that question.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, Dan, but it's
Okay.
maybe something we should flag for.
Yeah, just
for figuring out.
ask somebody in HR if that really does. Yeah.
And Michelle just
I don't know.
added that it's called reclassification at the national level, which might be why it got transferred over here, but we can make a note about it. I just want to ask one question. We have 4 task force members here, which is the minimum for a quorum. We're approaching, well, we are at 12:15. Does anyone have a hard stop at 12:30? Dan, I bet you do. I just saw you smile.
I do, and I have a little bit of leeway, but I've got to get to my next meeting, so I'll hang in as long as I can.
Okay, so we'll have to. We
I
would
think
have
we
to
have just a
adjourn.
couple of work items left.
Okay, all right.
I can
Go
probably
ahead,
hang in
Dom.
for that.
All right.
So before we move on, can I just add some comment? So Dan, we researched this extensively, even going through each of the 23 or 24 states that have already, enacted legislation on this classification of telecommunicators, call takers, and dispatchers. And there's a variety. I documented a variety of different legislative language and benefits of this classification. For example, in some states, PTSD benefits were provided to those folks, to that class of responders, and I think that the new association of the emergency Vermont Emergency Dispatch Association also supports this, and we spoke with them about some of their their needs and their thoughts on advancing this. So I think we can change the terminology from classification, but the intent is to provide access to benefits that these individuals don't have yet at this time.
Yeah. And Rick, I hear you, and trust me when I say I don't oppose that notion at all. I think that's fine. It strikes me a little bit that there's a parallel here between EMS agencies who come and say, we want to be classified as an essential service, which again, I think is a good thing in general. But if you go to the legislature and say, classify us, what you're saying to them is give us a pat on the head with no requirements. So if you're going to say that, I think what you need to say is, what does classification mean? And be explicit in the ask. So if you say we want to be a first responder, you can't just say make us a first responder, because they go, sure, you're a first responder. If you really want those things to be true, you have to say, I want to be a first responder, and here's what it means. These are the benefits that we are seeking. Because otherwise they're just going to, I mean, that's the greatest gift we can give a legislature ever. It's a step they can take without having to actually do anything or spend any money. You're a first responder. Great. There you go. So we want to be able to clarify what the hell that means. And I would just suggest that if you're saying we want to classify, make sure you're explicit in terms of what that classification entails.
Fully understood. Makes a lot of sense.
Yep,
And
it does.
we have supporting language for that we could propose.
Great.
All right. Thank you, Don.
The last couple items that we looked at was standardized training. This was one that was certainly very important to the working group. They indicated a preference for option 2 initially, to create a list of approved training programs, and then transitioning to option 3, where it would evolve into a statewide certification for all job classifications for dispatchers. This would need to be coordinated, of course, with the policies and procedures work that is ongoing, and would need to be part of governance subcommittee development.
And also linked to the latter classification, right? I mean, there's a mutually beneficial relationship here to say, we want to be reclassified. Here's the steps that we are taking to earn that classification.
Exactly, right. And the final item for Tier 3 working group was staffing, and there were options related to continuing the current staffing process or to incorporate some form of hybrid staffing to more efficiently use the existing staff that's part of the various dispatch centers. So a hybrid staffing approach was to have the capability to have staff either shared among multiple centers or loaned from one to the other while being in a physical location. And that was the preference for the working group. And this, of course, would need to be based on what the Tier 1 regionalization approach would be as to how best to take advantage of this opportunity. And that completes the review of the work items for both Tier 2 and Tier 3. Any further questions, or I can send it back to you, Barb?
Okay. I appreciate you going over all of those. It helps to talk about them more than once, I find. So I thought it was a good discussion. So next item on the agenda is executive session if needed, which is not needed today. And then we go to new business. Does anyone have any new business for today? Alrighty, hearing nothing, we can.
Hold on,
I'm
I
sorry,
had
Barb.
problems.
Whoop, one sec. Let's see. Ron, do you have new business?
Yes.
Okay,
A couple
go
of
ahead.
things. Real quickies, like on the subject of like FYI items. First one is yesterday I got a newsletter that distributed like to piles and piles of people by Vermont Emergency Management. It goes to like piles of first responders. I am curious if perhaps maybe we can convince them to make mention of, our activities and try to get some more people to participate and pay attention to what we're doing and lend their opinions by doing so. They're sending out the newsletter anyway, so I think that would be something worth trying. And then the second thing is that I became aware yesterday that the Coalition of Fire and Rescue, or whatever their official name is apparently working with some folks in the legislature to introduce a bill which would require those who are putting towers to give free access to communications projects for county and regional, projects like that. It would not be something that individual agencies would be entitled to. And the hope is that not only will there be some, tower space made available, but that it would actually encourage agencies to work with their mutual aid partners and regional groups to do these things because, well, free is better than not free.
Interesting. That sounds like something we definitely want to watch. Can you, I mean, is there anything drafted yet or anything like that?
There was a draft and they said that they were working on it. So
Okay.
as I understand it, the bills need to be introduced by December. Is that the way it works? Something like that? I was having 5 conversations at the same time. So it's sometimes hard, but that's what I got out of it, that sometime before December, the bills have to all be introduced and to qualify them for the next legislative session.
I am not sure on that.
I don't think so, Ron, but I think that might be the legislative initiatives from the state departments. Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Yeah, it's probably not
I
a
don't
bad
know.
target though.
That doesn't
to get it
sound
on.
right to me though. Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be great if they did.
Yeah. Okay. I wonder, Dan, if you can ponder if a conversation with emergency management might be in
Yeah,
order.
sure.
Okay.
I know lots of people over there.
I
And
thought you
Ron, I'm
might.
not exactly sure what newsletter you're talking to, but if you shoot me a note about whatever it is, I'll be glad to. Yeah, we can definitely get something like that going. We also have listservs for all the cops, all the firefighters, and I know some guys over at EMS too that we could get information out on as well.
Apparently, Mark Bosma is the point person for that newsletter. The newsletter always comes attached to an email from him.
Okay. I will. I'll see what we can do.
All right. Thank you, Ron, for those 2 items. Dom, you were saying something and I stomped all over you, so go ahead.
That's all right. Yes, I did have a question about work items, the reports from Tier 2 and Tier 3 that we reviewed, and what the next steps are there. I know there was some request for some revised wording or additional clarification on a number of items, and we'll certainly work on those. What further next steps are there?
So I kind of envision that that maybe you have flagged the things that need rewording, and we could revisit them at the next task force meeting to see
Okay.
if everybody's good with that. And then I see, there could be a note that the entire task force has reviewed whatever the tiers were, Tier 2 and Tier 3,
Right.
and discussed them. And unless I sort of see the things that we have discussed and not objected to being compiled into a list of potential recommendations that we look at one more time at the end of this process to say, keep this on the list, get this off the list. Maybe we do some prioritization
Okay.
as a group. I don't know. That's just sort of how I see it. Does that work for people, or are there better ideas? I see
Works
Jim
for me.
nodding. Okay.
that works for me.
Okay, great. Dom and Rick, does that work for you?
Yes.
Yeah, good
Yeah.
approach.
Okay. All right then, if there's nothing new, nothing more rather under new business, I'd like to give Michelle and let's see, who else do we have from the public here? We'll put Phil Sisk into that category as well. Michelle or Phil, do you have anything you'd like to add today?
Good here.
No, I
Okay.
have no comments. Thanks. Very interesting to listen to the subcommittee there, the group's report. I appreciate that opportunity.
You bet. Glad you could join us today. Okay, so moving on then, confirm the next meeting date. We are on the books for September 24th for a regular meeting. Lots of working group meetings going on in between. If there's nothing further, we could have a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn. I'll
All right.
second it then.
Okay, Emily, you can sort that out however you would like. Okay, all in favor of adjourning for today, raise your hand or indicate by saying aye. Hands are
Aye.
up. And the ayes are in, and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. I'll note that we adjourned at 12:30 on the dot.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Have a good
everybody.
day.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Have a
Enjoy.
good day.
All right, bye-bye.